This episode of Jujutsu Kaisen was hilarious. I mean, the fact that Toto wanted to be best friends with the Yuji because his taste in women not only matched his own, but he was also a badass. Of course, he got a little annoyed with how he was using his powers, but, the fact that he decided to change his ways makes him, once again, consider him to be his best friend. So much to the point that he's willing to go against his own comrades to say, you do not do this. This is how it's going down. This was an incredible episode. I was sort of expecting that this episode would be mostly an action fest, and I was perfectly okay with that because just seeing a bunch of cool characters brawl with each other, you got Talking Panda, you got some crazy speech powers, you got just a bunch of really interesting ideas at play. I'm perfectly fine just watching a bunch of chaos unfold. And I mean, the fact that we have one side literally trying to kill our main character, which would now be the second time he would end up dead and probably not be able to come back again a second time. I mean, there's a lot at stake, so to have basically that occur, and you're watching it, you're having fun, you're saying, okay, yeah, I like this, and then you get some Step Brothers level hilariousness, and I'm like, I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, you basically have two monsters going up against each other. At first, it kind of looks like there's no way he's beating him, even though at first, it's like, oh, everyone's like, yeah, we made the right choice sending in Yuji rather than someone like Megumi or anyone else, because he easily can take down Toto, and even if he doesn't defeat him, at the very least, it'll buy us enough time to be able to secure this victory. And then it kind of just all flips on its head, and you're saying, oh my god, this man he's not gonna die here, but it actually did look like Toto was stronger than him. So the rise up and just the back and forth fighting, I thought was really fun because we haven't really seen something like this occur where we're not really worried that the character that Yuji's fighting is going to kill him. Everyone else on this guy's side is trying to kill him, but someone like Toto, he's not really about that. He's about basically two things: idols and tall girls with big asses. And if you have any interest in either one of those, he's probably going to want to call you a best friend and have him just kind of fantasize about, this man's got rejected now, not only in reality, but also in his dream sequence for his idol girlfriend here. It's hilarious. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. But I think that's kind of like one of the charms that separates Jujutsu Kaisen to a lot of its kind of battle shonen counterparts, is that it knows when to have fun. And even though they're having fun in this battle, you still fear that something bad could happen to Yuji because other characters are trying to kill him. And I actually really admire that his side was more concerned about protecting Yuji than they were about winning this competition. And I think that's another thing that helps separate it, is that when they introduce friendship powers in this series, and I see powers as kind of like that little term, that little gimmick that series like to use in order to overcome an obstacle, it never really feels convenient or anything. It feels like, well, this guy is their ally, and if not their friend, it makes more sense to protect his life than it does about winning a competition. And I like that. It's not like they're randomly powering up, they're getting a new super move to protect their best buddy Yuji. No, it's more of like, this makes the most sense, we're not bad people, let's protect him, and I really like that. And just the back and forth dialogue and how someone like Yuji, who generally I feel like if you were to write this scene, if you just had to give it a go, you'd probably write it as Yuji would be a little goofy towards Toto, Toto would be a little goofy towards him. But the fact that he's just honestly confused that this giant muscular beast is asking him these questions, and he's like, well, I guess if you're asking tall girl, big ass, and just to see him cry, he's probably thinking to himself, what in the actual hell? And I love that when he throws it in his face, if you want to be my best friend, you've got to stop doing this. And he's literally saying, I do not give a shit. Why are you asking me this? And it's just I feel like they're going to have the most reluctant friendship ever, where they're going to be best friends and they're not going to understand why, because they're going to have all these disagreements, but there's never going to be an eye to eye about things. Every time they meet up, they'll be like, there's my best friend Yuji, and Yuji will be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And then they'll somehow start talking about something that they like, maybe. I don't know, but it's really entertaining. I mean, the fight scene was actually quite good. I'm not usually a big fan of forest scenes. It's one of the things that just don't connect with me. I find them to be generally pretty boring. So I was really curious to see what they're going to do for a fight scene that was all about trees and things like that. And obviously you have the crashing into trees, spinning around, jumping through branches, and there were some fun factors to it. But I think the thing that made this forest sequence so good is perspective played a big part in the fight scenes, because there was a lot of distance between the characters and the way the trees would kind of overlap with the character models. There was a lot of speed and velocity to it that made it feel like they were rushing through a forest, and one wrong move, they could smack into a tree and bust open their skull. So for me, not really liking forest fight scenes all that much, I felt like they used the forest to their advantage to incorporate it to the actual fight, rather than just having it be a backdrop like I typically see, which is why I usually dislike them, because just looking at a bunch of trees just isn't interesting to me. So to actually use that as part of the fight for characters scouting or actually throwing other characters into it, it just makes it far more interesting, all things considered. I think this episode was fun. It wanted to be fun. It wanted to be funny. I mean, I can safely say that a talking panda is my favorite character, and I know nothing about the talking panda, but every time I see a talking panda, I just smile because I like pandas. That's enough to keep me entertained. Just throw a talking panda in the show, I'm going to be honest. But the amount of care and attention put into all the little finer details, the art, it really doesn't dip. And when it does dip, it's generally used for comedic purposes, so you're not really distracted. Animation continues to be smooth as butter, the voice actors are on point, and the story is still emotionally engaging. Even in the wake of all this action and animation and just going completely balls to walls insane, you're actually worried about Yuji's life, and that's all you need to do. And even though like Yuji and Toto were definitely like the stars of this episode, I don't think many people will deny that fact. I did like seeing other characters fight and just like the talking between characters, like having like one girl saying like, you know, I actually don't agree with what they're doing, but I'm not going to not fight in this competition. Which is interesting because she brings up the topic that basically the way you get promoted is by word of mouth, so it's not even skill-based, so there's probably plenty of sorcerers in this world who are actually not that powerful, or maybe there's very few like this, but there's probably some who are like, probably deserve to be a pretty low rank, but they know the right people and they got promoted like in the real world, unfortunately. So that's kind of interesting to see how she seemingly has a good conscience, but is like saying, a girl's gotta eat basically, so I'm gonna keep doing this. I don't agree with it, but this is how it's gotta be. And then obviously other characters kind of like throwing it in his face, Megami and things like that. So I just like that. I think there's like a lot happening without it feeling like a cluster mess. It feels like things are placed there for a reason, and probably within next week and the week after, depending on how long this kind of like jungle fight takes place, this little forest rivalry, I'm curious to see how many different fights we're going to witness and how many will be able to be completely memorable. I think sometimes when you have like these school events, the fight scenes, like you usually have like 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how large the cast is. In this case, probably 3 or 4, I imagine. Sometimes you can look at certain ones and say, oh, I would much rather focus in on, say, the Yuji and Toto fight much more than I would insert character here and here. But so far, based on what they've done for character designs, powers, and overall personalities, I don't think we're going to run into that issue. It should be all memorable. Obviously not as memorable as, say, Yuji and Toto for all of them, just because it's a hilarious, eventful mess, but they still will be able to keep us entertaining. I'm pretty confident in that fact. I would be shocked if there's any disposable fight in this little tournament that we're going on, because it just feels like with the absurd personalities that they have to work with, it would be pretty hard. You'd have to be a pretty shitty writer, I'll be honest, to mess this situation up. And based on everything we've seen with Jujutsu Kaisen, is it shitty? Absolutely not. It's goddamn amazing and deserves all the hype it's received. So, I mean, with a talented production team behind this, a good writer writing the source material, we gotta be in for a recipe for success. And if this is a good taste of what's to come, then I am very excited for more. Still loving Jujutsu Kaisen. It's one of those shows that you know you're always going to have a blast with, and it never disappoints in the slightest. Really excited for part 2 next week. I'm not sure how long this kind of like Battle of Schools is going to go on, but I mean, I'm here for it. I think it's interesting, and I like the idea of like inward fighting within groups. It's really fun, so let me know down below what you're feeling. And how excited are you for next week's episode of the best friends continuing on their brawl to the death, but not really. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, show your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.